So today we're looking at assignment 8.1, what is normal, and we're going to go ahead and talk about this last page, which hopefully you've tried on your own, but we're going to go over it. So question 1, Jordan scores a 53 on his math test. The class average is 57 with a standard deviation of 2 points. How many standard deviations below the mean did Jordan score? Well, if the mean or the average is 57, then I'm going to subtract off one standard deviation, which remember was 2 points, and that gives me 55. Well, 55 is still higher than Jordan's score, which is 53. So I'm going to subtract another standard deviation. 55 minus our standard deviation of 2 equals 53, which is Jordan's score. So Jordan's score is 2 standard deviations below the mean. On question 2, it says in Jordan's science class, he scored a 114. The class average was 126, with a standard deviation this time of 6 points. How many standard deviations below the mean did Jordan score? In comparison to his peers, which test did Jordan perform better on? Well, first let's figure out how many standard deviations he is below the mean here in his science class. So our mean is 126 points, and I'm going to subtract the standard deviation, which was 6 points. That gives me 120. Well, 120 is still higher than Jordan's score, which was 114, so I'm going to subtract another standard deviation. 120 minus a standard deviation of 6 points equals 114, which is Jordan's score. So once again, here in his science class, he is 2 standard deviations below the mean. Well, this means that in comparison to his peers, he scored 2 standard deviations below the mean in his math test. He also scored 2 standard deviations below the mean on his science test, which means he did the same on both tests. Okay. Next question, number 3, says rank the data sets below in order of greatest standard deviation to smallest. Well, remember that the standard deviation is a measure of spread, so the greatest standard deviation would be the greatest spread. The smallest standard deviation would be the least spread. So looking at this, I can see that B has a standard deviation of 0 because these numbers are all the same. There's no spread whatsoever. Here on A, the standard deviation is probably going to be about 1, since those numbers are all the same apart. On C, the standard deviation will probably be about 2, since those numbers reach 2 apart. On question D, the standard deviation again is going to be about 1, because each of those numbers is 1 apart. And here on E, the standard deviation, it looks like, is going to be about 0.5, since each of those numbers is about 0.5 or 1/2 apart from the others. So if I'm going from greatest to smallest, I can see that my greatest standard deviation is C. My next greatest is going to be A and D because they have the same standard deviation. Next will come E, whose standard deviation was 0.5. And last will be B, whose standard deviation was 0. On question 4, Robin made it to the swimming finals for her state championship meet. The times in the finals were as follows, and here are each of the times listed. If Robin's time was 2 minutes, 12.7 seconds, what percent of her competitors did she beat? So this 2 minute, 12.7 second right here is Robin. Remember that in order to beat her competitor, that means that her swim time had to be less than theirs, which means that Robin swam faster than these 3 people. So she swam faster than 3 out of 5 of her competitors. 5 competitors because I don't want to count Robin. Well, 3 over 5, if I type that into a calculator, it will equal 0.6, or in other words, 60%. So Robin swam faster than 60% of her competitors. On this last question, problem 5, it says, remember that in statistics, mu is the symbol for mean, and sigma is the symbol for standard deviation. So remember that this is called mu, and it's our mean, and this guy right here is called sigma, and he is our standard deviation. It says, using technology, identify the mean and standard deviation for the data set below. So typically I would do this on my calculator, but since I don't have one, I'm going to go ahead and open an Excel document. Here I am in Excel, and I've already pre-typed these data points for you. So we're going to go ahead and have Excel find for us the average and the standard deviation. So the first thing we want to find is the mean, and when we type this into Excel, I'm going to start with the equal sign so that Excel knows that I want it to solve for something. Then Excel doesn't use the word mean, it uses the word average. So I'm going to start typing in the word average, and here it pops up for me. And then because I'm using Excel for iPad, it asks me to type in each value individually, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to tell it that I want to start from here. Oops. Come on. And I want to go all the way down to here. And there's my mean, which I can see is going to be approximately 2.47 if I round that value. So back on the assignment, I'm going to write down that the mean, or the average, is the 2.47 that I just got from Excel. The next thing it asks for is the standard deviation. Now, if you looked at the notes page I gave you, there is a formula for standard deviation, but it's kind of obnoxious to use. It just takes a long time. So again, I'm going to have Excel do that for me. So in my next little cell, I'm going to type in the equal sign so that Excel knows that I want it to find the value. Then I'm going to type in ST for standard, and notice how it says STDev, which is what I want, the standard deviation. And again, since I'm using Excel for iPad, I'm going to go ahead and erase those values. But I want to start with this first value, and I want it to give me the standard deviation of all of these numbers. Now please notice that I made sure not to highlight the mean as part of my standard deviation. I hit enter, and Excel tells me that it is 1.95, which tells me that these data points have an average spread of about 1.95. So my standard deviation here is 1.95. So there's your assignment 8.1, and if you followed along in all 3 of my videos, you should now have this assignment finished.